Hi, good morning. This is Michael Cups with The Habit Architect. I'm really excited about our episode today. I want you to stay tuned and tune in for the entire thing to learn about meeting wasted times. Meet Benj. He's a dynamic speaker and a great coach, and I'm looking forward to the conversation there. So, learning how to take complexity out of your business while keeping the soul in it. So, stay tuned for all of that. And as always, you can check out Time Bennett at timebennett.io. But let's get on with the show, and I'm going to introduce Benj. I'll go ahead and bring him on, but I'd like to say Benj doesn't just talk about systems when he's helping businesses. He also talks about soul. And that's a bit different when you think about what we talk about a lot is just business things, but there's also values, there's soul, there's interesting things about the company that can get lost as you begin to grow. And I think founders have this problem a lot because they associate with an idea that they started, and as they get going into the business, complexity and processes and more people just naturally are going to take place. And Benj has built a system to prevent that or to help you with that transition. So Benj, welcome.
Thank you, Cups. I'm super honored that you would have me on here. Excited to talk about your new course and all the things that you're getting into around meetings. So vital.
Yeah, it's interesting because we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But I think windows are kind of you can see a symptom of the things that you talk about, complexity or complacency and things like that in companies. So we'll get to that. But why don't you talk about system and soul? Just tell us about
Sure.
that yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. I was in retrospect, I was a very soulful leader, and I had somebody come in and help me implement some systems in my business, and that was eye opening for me. So I wanted to do that for the whole world. But more I got into it, I found out that as you go and implement some of these systems, a lot of the companies didn't have what I had as an emphasis on the soul in my organization. So now we had system without soul, and they had to be put together. They had to be done together, and that's actually the catalyst for sustaining healthy growth in an organization. So we do that through our framework. We have some software. We've got 50 coaches around the country helping companies do that at all levels.
That's fantastic. So when you look at a company or somebody reaches out to you, or you talking to a CEO, what are the signs you look for that says, hey, there's something going off track here?
Yeah, a lot of times there's just frustrations because the CEO is not going as fast as he thinks that the company should be. They're fighting the same fires over and over. He's getting dragged in, he or she is getting dragged into the same conversations. So there's a term I use a lot called organizational velocity. Just how fast is the organization able to move, execute, perform, and transform? And when they feel like they're stuck in mud, that's the worst feeling in the world. Sometimes they know why it is and they're having trouble getting out. Sometimes they're not even sure why. So it's great conversations. And then the uniqueness about what I do as a coach is it's always with the leadership team of the organization. It's not one-on-one coaching. We really take the approach that it's a team sport, and we all
Yeah.
have to be playing the game the same way. And so we're all trying to level up at the same time.
So that's great, and I like that because it is a team sport, like you said. So if you see that complacency or that feeling of speed, you mentioned that the CEO might say we're not moving as fast as I'd like to move. What do you do? What does the program kind of entail?
Yeah, well, very, very generically, I'll put it into three buckets. One is we've got to get really clear on a magnetic vision and a very focused strategy for the organization. We do that with a one-page roadmap. Uh, that has a lot of soul in it too. It's really about who do we want to be as an organization as much as what do we want to do and why are we trying to do the things that we're trying to do. Then we have the four tools for confident execution because there's nothing worse than having a great strategy and
Yeah.
no confidence that we can go execute on it. And behind that is a bunch of other tools related to personal development, leadership development, culture development, the identity of the organization, team health, all of those things that are kind of the grease that keeps the gears moving and going faster and faster and increases that organizational velocity.
Yeah, and what did they experience? I mean, are you teaching
Oh,
people something they don't have, or they know it and they're just not doing it?
it's some of both, and I think you're hitting the nail on the head. One of the reasons that um, CEOs, especially, are hesitant to hire us is because they do know the answer, and there's a little bit of shame because
Yeah.
they feel like they should have solved all these things already. But as we know, they've got a million things on their plate, and they've got to prioritize. And sometimes it takes some help. Sometimes it takes an outside voice. Sometimes it takes a proven framework to come and put some organization around all those things.
Yeah, yeah. I do a lot of work around habit building and systems around habits, and even in the workplace. But what I find a lot of times is people know what they need to do to get healthier. They know what they need to do
Oh
to,
yeah.
and it's, so we're not teaching them something they don't already know. It's just trying to systemize it a little differently so they feel the reward sooner, I think. And it's hard when, somebody that's trying to lose weight, you're not going to lose weight tomorrow. But
Yeah.
30 days you're going to see results, and then
Yeah.
40 days you're going to see more. And it's a challenge. I'm sure you face the same thing with groups like that.
Absolutely. So I'm curious for you, as you've been going down this meeting rabbit hole, which
Yeah.
is key. I could talk about it from our perspective. I just read The $1 Trillion Coach, and they talk about it in there. Meetings are like it's the glue that holds the whole thing together. What
Yeah.
do you think meetings reveal about a team's culture?
Yeah, I think, thanks for asking that. It's interesting because I've got a big customer and I sit in their meetings, and they will always have something like 15 people on it. And there will be 3 people that actually contribute to the meeting. So
Mm,
what that reveals to me is that they've lost their values. They don't understand why they're having that meeting. So they feel like they have to invite everybody. So they feel like they're part of it,
yep.
even though they
Yep.
don't have to contribute. But think about that hour that you just took away from that person of actually doing some productive work, when, especially in the world of AI note takers, not everybody has to be in the room. Right? Like,
Right.
it's a summary, read a summary. And I think COVID kind of set people in a wrong path, because we did have meetings on Zoom, and we had to, because we were trying to figure out a way to manage in a new world. But some companies just haven't left that. Not the company I work for now, thankfully, but I've worked for some companies, and they actually measured their day of productivity by how many meetings they had. And if you think
Oh,
about it, that's just, it's an insane metric. And there was some sort of bravery when you came off and you said, "Oh, I've got 6 back-to-back calls." Okay, that just said you've wasted a day. You've wasted 6 hours of your day doing meetings that could have been 10-minute conversations, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what it reveals is a complacency or a confusion on what the goal is. I
yeah.
think that's kind of
Yeah.
it. And so, yeah, I mean, do you see the same thing?
Yeah, I think, and we teach one specific meeting for a team, but I think that when you do one meeting really, really well, it should get rid of a lot of those other meetings. Like,
Exactly.
we shouldn't be living in meetings, because you're right. We're not, some things need to happen in a meeting. There are good
Yeah.
reasons for meetings. I'm not a meeting hater,
Right.
but we all know, like, there's certain meetings that we see on our calendar that as soon as we see it, our energy just drops.
Yep.
And it's not just the time on the meeting, it's that energy that you carry into the day, into the meeting. After the meeting, you might need some recovery time.
Yeah.
So let's switch it to the affirmative then. What is
Yeah.
one habit shift that turns meetings from a time waster into a decision machine?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you said decision machine, because I think you're right. Not all meetings are bad. Let's make sure meetings we're walking out with a decision or a direction from that. So the first number one thing I think is have an objective. What is the objective of that meeting? And once you define the objective, then everybody that you invite should either contribute to that objective or be a decision maker of that objective, right? So it kind of starts filtering down from that. What is the goal of that meeting? And there's nothing worse for me when I get a meeting invite and there's nothing in there. So it just says, whatever, status update. Okay,
Yeah.
why? So I think it's really the objective and the people you invite. And then just a habit tip that I love doing is I've shortened any 30-minute meeting to 25 minutes, any hour meeting to 50
Hmm.
minutes. And
Yeah.
guess what? You still get through the content that you need to get thrown, and everybody gets a break. So you talked about recovery. Why not give them 5 minutes or 10 minutes after a long meeting where they can stretch their legs, go get coffee, whatever it is they need to do. They
Yeah.
just have that little bounce back into the next thing they need to get productive with. So that's my tips. And I put it in a free training. It's a 20-minute training, just goes through those things. And we'll put the link on this after this show, but I urge everybody to either go through it yourself or share it with your teammates, because one of the things I think you teach is systems. Right? It's okay for one person to start doing things right, but if we get everybody doing it, now
Right.
everybody's in the same plane, right? We know why we're meeting, we're going to get it done, and we're going to move on. So
We had a conversation just on Monday. My COO said, we were talking about calendars, and we looked at her calendar. She had these like 10-minute blocks of decompress after every meeting. And she's like, "Sorry about that. My AI meeting thing did that automatically." And we're like, "Why are you sorry? That is so wise, because there's no way you can be ready for the next meeting or the next thing coming straight out of the last thing. So it's like, do not apologize for that. That is strategically smart. Do you think that bad meetings are like, what is that reflective of? Is that typically like, starts at the top and CEO doesn't have great meetings, so the rest of the culture doesn't? Or is it something deeper? Or do you know where that comes from in organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends somewhat on the size of the company. In big companies, I think there's a feeling that it is their leader, but it may be a divisional leader or it may be something like that. But I really think the biggest symptom is that there's an avoidance of personal responsibility in bigger companies. I'm saying so they want everybody to collectively make decisions on certain things, and sometimes you have to
Yeah.
do that, right? You have to do that collective decisioning, but it doesn't have to be a long drawn out process, right? And so that hesitancy to make decisions may be fear of risk, fear of losing their job, fear of making the wrong choice. But the cultures that I see that actually do that aggressively and say, "Hey, we're making a decision and we're going to get on with it," and then
Yeah.
they'll adjust along the way. I think they are more apt to outperform their competitors, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Let's dig into this for a second, because I
Yeah.
think you're right. Are there habits or insights that you've stumbled on to help clear that up? Because I think people, one thing I see is that people come into even a really healthy organization and they bring their baggage from bad organizations. And
Yes.
so they've been given this authority to go and lead in this area, but then they want permission for every single thing, or they want to pretend like something they've already decided is now up for this collaborative debate. How can you help shape mindset there?
Yeah, that's a great question. The baggage that they bring from previous experiences is an interesting one because that's a hard habit to break because
Yeah.
especially as if you think about a young person that gets into a company and they're trained however that company's culture is for meetings. It's hard to when you get into another culture to say to change that because that's how you witnessed it, right?
Yep.
But I think that what you really have to start thinking about doing is building a habit of accountability in each meeting, right? And that could be before you show up to the meeting, or it could be when you leave the meeting and assign every task to somebody, one person, not a group. You can't say, here's a task. I want you five people to go think about that. One owner, and then they'll figure out if they need the other four people to finish the task. But
Right.
accountability has to start getting in there. And accountability doesn't necessarily mean, you're delivering your annual expectation today. It could mean that we need to get something done before next Tuesday, and that is accountability. And some things are, well, why are we doing certain things? Let's stop doing them. So I actually use the framework of a matrix, a priority matrix, where you have do first, schedule later, delegate, and stop.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that framework works in a meeting sometimes if you're really trying to get action out of it. And I personally think when you start empowering individuals to do something collectively, it's going to rise, right? So when the ocean rises, all boats float up, kind of, sort of speak.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that accountability measure is a challenging one, but there's people I think waiting for responsibility and just their
Yeah.
chance to show it. So I don't know if that ties into the soul aspects of what you do, but you asked me a culture question. I'm curious about what your view is on that.
Well, I was dying to ask you another question, so maybe we'll
Okay.
come back to that. But let me, and maybe this is the culture question, but I find that if I have, especially maybe not the first meeting of the day, but if I've got multiple meetings, I show up and I'm ready to do business. Like we talked about being a decision making machine, right? Like I'm here. What are the decisions we need to make? What do we need to solve? Let's get really clear and let's knock it out. Um, and that is efficient. However, I'm like trying my best to be cognizant that some people need more emotional connection, and like maybe they haven't been in 5 meetings today. Maybe they've been them and their computer doing their work, especially in a virtual setting, right? So like, how do you balance like freedom and humanity with efficiency?
That's a great question. It is a challenge. You're right. Some people, especially in our remote working world, there is a need for connection too. There's just to if you and I jumped on a call and we had three other people with us, there's a natural tendency to have that. I'll call it small talk. Where how was your
Yeah.
weekend, Benj? How did I saw you had a workout? How was the workout? That kind of stuff. And I think you do have to allocate time for that. But I think there's the structure of the meeting in which you can address that. Maybe you're having a meeting for those touch-ins that are just the objective is to get to know one another. The objective
Yeah.
is to blow off steam. The objective is, but again, it just comes in with that objective. But like you said, if you show up and you've got a busy day, you really need a decision made. Those meetings have an objective of that. So I think you can kind of temper that a little bit with your organization based on what is the objective of that meeting. And
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting every meeting has to be hard hitting every time, but that's really what it is. When you get out of a meeting is when you do the work, right? So.
You just sparked something that I didn't even realize we did until you were just talking through that. But when we have scheduled meetings, like we use Zoom, and those, like, we're pretty disciplined. Like we show up with an agenda, and this is what we need to solve on, the clarity of like this is the decisions that need to be made. But when we use just the huddle feature in Slack, it's always, and there's always a check-in, kind of the human side of those ones
Yeah.
with an agenda. We always start with that, even if it's short, small. But
Yeah.
man, if we jump on a huddle, it's like boom, boom, bye. Right?
Yeah.
It's like it's the most efficient, and usually those are impromptu. And then we
Yeah.
also have like our big, like, hey, we're gonna hang out for 2 hours on this Friday, and just do
Yeah.
team time. Because if we were in an office, we'd all spend that time over lunches or coffees or whatever that is, and we need to make sure we build that in.
Yeah,
That's
I
really
think
good.
the one thing that Agile gets right, the Agile development cycles, I'm not
Mhm.
sure if you're familiar with it, but
Very, yeah.
they do the daily stand-ups. And if you think about that, that's the ultimate efficient meeting. It's supposed to be for 15, 20 minutes. Everybody gets up and says what they did yesterday, what they're doing today, and are there any impediments? And you don't have to do it daily, depending on the job responsibilities, but that's an interesting construct for that really productive check-in and go. And because it's going to probably list out the impediments, or somebody needs to take those on as tasks to get rid of them.
Yeah, yeah. I read a quote by you. I was wondering if you could unpack this. You
Uh-oh.
don't you don't fix your calendar by hopping. You fix it by deciding one block at a time. What does that
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, it's that complacency in saying let's have another meeting, right? We've all been in it, right?
Mm.
Well, let's have another meeting about that, or we didn't get to our conclusion today, so let's have another meeting tomorrow or next week. And so, like I said, that one culture that I was a part of, they judged their productivity by how busy their calendar was. And I was actually searching for, I just need a couple hours to go actually do the work that we've talked about in these meetings. And so I think the real thing that people need to get confident in is saying no to meetings, right?
Yes.
If you are not required, if you're not a contributor or a decision maker for that topic, then opt out and ask them politely for the meeting notes. Could you just send me the meeting notes afterwards? I'll
Yeah.
catch up. And it's hard, especially for Gen Z and younger people, because they haven't been trained to do that. But sometimes saying no is the biggest yes you can do. And I think that's what I meant in that quote.
That's good. That's good. It reminds me of Elon Musk is famous for saying, like, if you're not contributing to a meeting, just walk out. Like in any of his companies, leave.
Yeah, exactly. And what an empowering thing that would be. And there's some cultures, you and I've probably coached in them, that they would go, they would frown on that. Well,
Yeah.
why did he leave?
Yeah.
Who does he think he is? That kind of attitude.
Yeah.
And that's too bad, because what he did is said, I'm choosing to go be productive somewhere else. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, and that just feels weird too, like
Yeah.
socially.
Yeah.
Like, I think a better approach is probably asking on the front end, like, hey, what's the contribution you're
Yeah.
asking of me in this meeting up front? And if there's not a good answer, then maybe you just don't show up, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. There is the kind of the courtesy and the rules of kind of just being polite, that there's other ways of saying no than just walking out. But, Musk has made a history of being bold like that. So,
Yes, right, right. He swings the pendulum so far that you're like, I'm not going that far, but maybe I could move a little
yeah.
further. Like I love most big thought leaders that create some controversy, that there's some truth in what they're saying. We need to move a little further, but maybe not all the way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
so can we go to some of the, like, principles in the course. I don't want you to give the whole thing away, but the course is
Yep.
free, so I guess we can.
It
Which
is. It is.
obviously we're here talking about, but we would love for everybody to grab it afterwards. We'll give some details on that at the end, but because you've put a lot of time, energy, research into this. But give us some of the principles. Maybe take us back to like, why was this? You've been in the habit architect space for a
Yep.
long time.
Yep.
Why did you gravitate toward meetings and put so much time into helping in that
Yeah.
realm?
Well, there's two reasons. One, I have a big customer, and I've said in so many of their meetings that nothing gets decided, and there's so many people. When I look at the human capital, when you look in Zoom and you can see all the attendees, and you realize that wow, 10 of them didn't even say hi, they didn't even check in, they just sitting on the call, and
Wow.
they're not really doing anything, or maybe they're multitasking, et cetera. So that was one thing that just grinds at me. I just think, gosh, free those people up to do what they can go do best for the firm. And then secondly, I just get so many people tell me if I could just get out of some meetings, and uh, I just started digging into that and saying it is. I mean, if you just think about the time spent in meetings, a CFO would lose his mind or her mind, right?
Absolutely.
If they
Absolutely.
really knew how many people were on it and what was getting done, they would lose their mind. So I just thought just a little deep dive on it, and I really kept it simple. I mean, there's no reason to overthink it. There's just simple ways to make a meeting better, and it is thinking about who you're inviting, what's the objective, things like that. So I kind of, in the course, I talk about what a bad meeting looks like and what a good meeting would look like, and then I give you a sample agenda that you can just drop into Outlook or Google, whatever email system you use to set up calendar invites. Think about that objective and think about who you're inviting before you even send it, because that is when the meeting is kind of set in how well it's going to be designed.
Mhm.
And then there's a few other tips in there, but the last one is that meeting map, or that kind of priority matrix. So people walk out with, they know what to do before the next meeting, before the next whatever it is that you're solving, and each person has an assigned task, whatever that may be. And not each person, but people that need the task are assigned to one person, not just generically, hey, we
Yep.
need to go think about that market analysis, right? It's
Yeah.
got to be that Benj owns the market analysis and Cups owns the PowerPoint presentation for the customer, or whatever it may be, right? At least then we're set. We may not have made the decision, but we made the decision to get the work done and how we're going to do it, right? And so that's what the course goes through, and it's a simple thing. There's some downloads in there. It's your typical digital course where I talk about stuff. I'll walk through a Google Doc that goes through these tips, and it was designed to be very quick and shareable. So, like I said, if I make every meeting better, then hopefully my peers will start doing the same. And so just
Yeah.
share it and do that. So
That's
would that
great.
align with some of the stuff you're doing in System and Soul?
Yeah, absolutely. We teach the one of the first things we do, one of the four tools for confident executions is this weekly sync meeting. And we have a very prescribed agenda, which people kind of squirm when they hear that, and there's time allotments for
Yeah.
that. And I equate it to going to the gym for the first time in a long time. Like, it's very awkward, and if you give it 3 or 4 weeks, it's going to feel better. And if you give it 3 or 4 more weeks, you're going to wonder how you ran a team and a company without it, right?
Yeah.
And exactly like you said, when we teach this, everybody's like, I can't do one more meeting, and I'm like, time out. This is the meeting,
Yeah.
and this is the meeting. There shouldn't be. And maybe you're like on the leadership team and then you lead your department, and so you have two, but this should get rid of 4, 5, 10, depending on how bad the company is, of
Yeah.
these other meetings, because we're so effective at having this one, and we put the things that pop up on the agenda for this one, and we
Yep.
work through the agenda in an efficient manner. We make decisions, like you said. It's critical. And I think the weekly sync meeting, and then the other meeting, is that is often forgotten, rarely taught, is how do we do one-on-one coaching on
Ah,
whatever the timing is that
yeah.
on that. But we teach at least at a minimum quarterly, and I think that the leadership, personal development, health culture will only grow as strong as those one-on-one coaching
I
meetings are.
agree.
So I think meetings really are where like the company is either bleeding efficiency or bleeding waste. And
Yeah.
so I love that you
Yeah,
dug in deep.
I'm glad you said that about one-on-ones because that fascinates me too. And what's interesting about a one-on-one, I'll equate it to the annual review thing. But if you're doing annual reviews, you're doing it all wrong, right? You should do these one-on-ones every
Right,
say,
exactly.
quarterly.
Yes, exactly.
But what's interesting about it is the more input that's done before that one-on-one, I think it's more valuable, right? So if there's data that's needed to assess the job that they did or the job that they need to go do, it just makes it more valuable. And I think the more prep, what I get cringe is when a manager shows up to a one-on-one and says, "Oh, how did your week go?" or something like that, right? And instead of having a very prescriptive saying, "How did this," a very specific action go? How did this go? Or what are you doing about this project, et cetera. I think that it goes into that. With good one-on-ones can change the shape of a company, I think.
Well, the principles are the same. It's what is the agenda? Like, let's get intentional about like what, not just we need to have a meeting, but what is the meeting? How are we going to run the meeting? What's a good meeting look like? The objectives of the meeting. What's the follow up from the meeting? The takeaways that people are owning. Both of those exist in whether it's a weekly meeting, whether
Yeah.
it's a coaching meeting, any of those, they're the same. And I think just the intentionality around meetings, especially, if you're going to have a weekly meeting, back to the CFO question, like once a week with your team for 90 minutes with your at a senior leadership team level, probably your five or six highest paid employees, like that ticker adds up really, really quick. So
Yeah,
it makes
it
a lot
does.
of sense to get really, really good at it.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
think that I think the hygiene you equated it to fitness center, regimen, and I think if you went and really talked to people, I mean, as a leader, you went to your team and said, "Listen, if we can have this one sync meeting a week, I'm going to take four other meetings off your calendar this week so you can do your job more efficiently." I think
yeah.
most people would say, "I'll sign up for that. I want that. I want one meeting instead of five." And I think if we just have those candid conversations, sometimes people will get behind it and get more focused for that sync meeting. Are you seeing that in your coaching?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm going to steal the way you just said that as a sales pitch, but because I don't sell it that way. But I think but that is the reality of what can happen when we do this well. And you know, there's the old adage that a task will take the time that you allot for it,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And
Deming was
um,
the scientist that wrote that.
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
so a
Work
lot of
expands to the time allocated was
yes, yep, that's the principle right there,
yeah.
and I find it true. It's true for myself if I'm
Yeah.
whatever it is at my desk. But a lot of CEOs, are, man, I'm a slave to this thing. I'm working 60, 70 hours a week. I need more hours. They go to more hours, not
Yeah.
more efficiency in the 60 hours they're putting into this thing. Like, well, what if you could actually be that efficient or more with 40 hours? Like, what do you need to do less? I remember early in my CEO years, it happened like 3 years in a row where the week that I was on vacation, the company had the best week ever. And
Yeah.
I'm like, is the answer me going on vacation? Because we can make this work. Um, and there's some truth to that. Like,
Yeah.
just when who knows what I was disrupting, who knows what I was interrupting. Not that I'm the sole cause or problem or reason either way, but I think when we just give space for people to do what we hired them to do,
Yeah.
give them the tools, the clarity of the task, the autonomy to go work, and really a lot of the conversations we need to have as leaders and managers is around the results that they're getting. I have a personal theory that we don't hold people accountable because of what I call clarity guilt.
Yeah.
We know we haven't given them the clarity of exactly what's expected to be able to hold them accountable to the results.
Yeah.
And same thing shows up in a meeting, like you're saying, like, hey, this is what I'm expecting you. You own this. Come back in 2 weeks with this deliverable, whatever it is. This is the metric we're going to be tracking,
Yeah.
and nothing should be a surprise.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's fantastic advice, and I love the guilt comment there. So tell me, I'm just curious a little bit more about System and Soul. Who's your ideal customer? Are you working with big companies, small companies, medium sized startups? What's your
Startups are hard, so let's
yeah,
exclude them first.
yeah,
When you're in founder mode or stage one, systems are your enemy. You've got
yeah,
to go fast. You've got to try a lot of things. You've got to fail as fast as possible. We don't want to create systems around failure. We want to create systems around what's working. So it's really once we find that, we enter stage two. And usually it's around employees because employees tend to create the complexity. Revenue changes depending on industry. If I'm a home builder, I send a sell $1-2 million house. I've got $2 million in revenue, but I've got no complexity, right? So when we talk about employees, that's where stuff starts to break down. That's where founder mode starts to fail. And so what we want to do is work with the organization to transition them from founder mode to leader mode. So what does it look like from that founder who has amazing gifts? We don't want to strangle them. We want to harness all of that energy and put a support structure in place that they can keep bringing all that energy that they brought in founder mode. So anything 25 and up, 25 to 75 is a sweet spot. But I mean, I break that rule all the time. My largest client has like 1,300 employees. So but in that sweet spot is where you're trying to figure everything out really fast. The faster you can get through figuring those things out and making that transition, then life just, the sun comes up, bunnies start bouncing, there's rainbows everywhere. I mean, we're never to that place in business because there's always the next problem, but we have the tools tools, people, and structure to go solve the next problem instead of getting stuck by them.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you said that, I thought of a teenager, right? So you've got the infant years and things like that. And then when you're a teenager, it's been a long time since I've been a teenager, but I had two of them. And so you can just see that their brain is working 100 miles an hour. And there's so many things coming at them, whether it's school or friends or this and that. And especially in the world of social media, that complexity enters in when they're a teenager, and you have to kind of figure out how to eventually become a young adult, right? And so that it sounds like that's the kind of the area that you're finding companies they're kind of past that initial stage, but now they're just trying to figure their way into big companies.
That's right. Yeah. And early stage, that founder mode needs to hire a lot of people that can do the tasks. And founders tend to know what all needs to be done. They're running on their gut, not data, not metrics, not systems. And so it's like, hey, you go do this, you go do this, you go do this. They build themselves as a bottleneck. I used to think that was bad. I think now I just think that's part of the process. And so as long as they have some consciousness that that's what they're doing and they're going to have to undo that, it's probably actually the right thing to do.
Yeah, that's great observation. Man, the time flew by. I try to keep these to 30 minutes or 45 minutes. Why don't you just share a little bit about as we kind of wrap up, a little bit about how people find you? I know there's a ticker scrolling, but what's the best way to find you?
The best place to find everything is benjmiller.com, BENJ Miller.com. From there, you can get to my LinkedIn, you can get to System and Soul. I've got a daily leadership tip email. It's super short. You can read it in less than 30 seconds. It's just a reminder or a thought, or challenge question that, I wrote it 3 years ago. It's on repeat. So it's, I get them the same thing that I got last year on the same day. And I'm like, dang, that's good. I needed reminded of that. So it's really just a reminder of all the things that we're supposed to know and think and do as leaders in organizations. So that's a great free tool for everybody to grab and follow along.
Absolutely. That's great. And you can find you on LinkedIn, and I'm sure you've got all the other channels going, and YouTube, et cetera. And you've got your own podcast. You've got a podcast too. You want to mention that one?
Yeah, sure. We do sessions by System and Soul. So it's our System and Soul podcast. And what we try to do, we've been through several iterations of this, and in this new season called Sessions, what we're trying to do is bring as much of what we learn, experience, and do in a session room with the senior leadership team and communicate that publicly. So it's a lot of like, hey, here's my reflections on some of the sessions that I've had with clients. Here's some of the tools that we're using. And then once a month, Mackenzie, my co-founder, and I, who's my co-host on the podcast, we bring our like hot take of something we heard or listened or read, and we just kind of banter about it. And
that's great.
Some of those are my favorite.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for sharing here. I mean, I think the lesson for everybody that's listening is time is it's not just valuable; it's the foundation for leadership. And your organization helped you turn that into what it looks like in a System and Soul group. And then we
Yeah.
did talk on meetings. I urge everybody to think about the next meeting you're sitting in or you're planning, and go take our training. It's easy. It's 20 minutes, and share it with others. But it's going to bring your organization more clarity and more energy to what they're doing if you're not bearing down on them with meeting after meeting after meeting that's unplanned.
Absolutely.
So that's fantastic. I thank you so much, Benj, for being here. Everybody, thank you for tuning in to The Habit Architect. We always enjoy it. Please do go to your favorite podcast and subscribe, follow, whatever the mechanism is, so you get notices when every episode drops.